wild and crazy times as a young bushwhacker?
Wild and crazy times. Well, lots of wild and crazy times. We, when did we first go to Europe? 74, I think. And, well, it was a good start. Oh, look, some jolly music starting up, yes. What we did was we wrote to 300 folk clubs because at the time we were playing the sort of music that was having a resurgence in Europe, and here we were sort of on our own over here. This is 74 or so, and we thought we're desperately keen to get to Europe. So I wrote 300 letters to folk clubs saying, can we come and play? We're desperate to come and play, and we got 2 replies. And so here we were, having bought our airline tickets, and we thought, God, what are we going to do? So we all sat around. I mean, we're all determined to go, so we just went. And we got there and we said, why didn't you reply to us? And they said, oh, you know, why waste 30p? I mean, you know, if you were coming, you were coming. I mean, you know, and I thought, okay, that makes sense. And so we spent 4 months not realising that everything's booked 4 months ahead there. So we just had to sit there for 4 months with a capsicum in our fridge. That was all we could afford to eat, really. And then we started playing, and we stayed there for 9 months. And then the pub we played at in Melbourne, we'd run out of money, so he actually lent us the money for our fares back to Melbourne on the provision that we played there 2 nights a week for 6 months to pay him off, but that was fine. And so as soon as we'd done that, we thought we'd get into debt and go again. So we've been back 7 times altogether and just had the best time. You know, there's nothing like going to strange countries and taking your music, and really they hadn't heard anything like us before, because they'd heard the Irish and Scots music that a lot of what we do is based on, but they hadn't heard what had happened to it 200 years on, taken out to this island out in the middle of the ocean. And we didn't know what they'd make of it. We thought they'll either think it's a plastic imitation, or they'll think it's good. And they loved it because it was much more raw and energetic than they were used to. Because I mean, you see bands like Keela now and Shugan Lifty from Scotland now. They're incredibly lively and you know, going back to the Pogues, I suppose. But before that, if you thought about cutting-edge traditional bands, you were thinking about older people, great players, but with respect for the tradition, which often meant they even sat down to play. Now, it was fabulous music, but they didn't actually convey anything with their bodies. So communicating it to young people was a real problem. And that's you know, as I said, when you see Keela now or Shugan Lifty or bands like that, they actually convey that passion and excitement with physical movement as well. And that's what we did, and I think that's why we were so successful over there. Just as you well know, you can't make any money. And eventually that becomes part of the equation.
Did you get the inspiration from the music?
Where did we? I saw a band. I'd been listening to folk music, you know, Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and all those sorts of things. And I went to a folk club in Sydney in about 1967 or 8, and I played in a rock and roll band, so I was Otis Redding and, you know, Black Soul and everything, which I really loved. And I saw this bush band, and they were actually singing all these songs about Australia, and I'd never really heard anybody singing any songs about Australia, because the only person who was doing that was somebody like, you know, a Slim Dusty, a country guy, and I lived in the city, so I'd never seen him. And these guys were singing songs all about Australian history and Australian attitudes and people working on the land, and I was absolutely rapt. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic. I didn't realise that music actually existed. And that was really it. You know, that was the inspiration for me. To find that there was actually a white Australian folk music that I'd never been exposed to. And the thing that I was really excited about was once we started doing it, we started exposing lots of other people in the cities especially, and they'd never heard it either. And that's been a real buzz. And that, it's the same buzz I still get now. Although, a little more conservatively speaking these days,
So did you actively go out and seek old Australian songs at any point?
We were very lucky that at the time there were about half a dozen people who were spending most of their time. They'd been performers, but they were academics as well, and they were actually trying to save a lot of this music, which hadn't really ever been collected. But the original players were all in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and they were just really worried that this music was actually going to disappear with these people who were invariably dotted around the country in some bush town and played a bit of accordion or a bit of concertina, a bit of fiddle. And as I said, it was just a really lucky time that this is during the 60s, that there was this passion for carving out some sort of identity, really, because we'd been through, in popular music, that was the British invasion and American music, and then we started generating our own pop stars, and it was all part of that, being proud of Australian music, and these people went out and collected all these songs, so we really didn't have to do much of that at all. And really we were into just playing. I mean, we weren't into collecting old versions, but that was being done. So we just thought our job was to go out there and have fun, and hopefully in the meantime people would have fun as well coming along to our shows. And so far, 27 years on, it's still happening, which is just sensational. Bugger off. Yeah, please.
So what were the instruments you first started playing?
Well, I was a drummer in the rock and roll band, like a really bad drummer, like just getting away with it. And of course there were no drums in folk bands then, so when I started playing in this Irish band as a sort of precursor to this, I went to live in Perth for a while, and of course the mining boom had just happened in Perth. And there were literally people who were carpenters earning like $5,000 a week, and lots of them had come. It was a bit like a return to the gold rushes. You had lots of people from Scotland and Ireland and all over the world coming out here to head up north of WA and partake in this amazing mineral boom. And it was a sensational time to be there because the town was just full of money. I mean, I had this job in a teacher's college, and you would literally go to work every day and find that somebody wasn't there. And you'd say, what happened to them? And they'd say, oh, Tasmanex or Poseidon. And you'd say, oh yeah, what happened? They said, well, Bill bought 4,000 shares in Poseidon at like 10 cents a share, and as of yesterday, the shares are worth $128 each. So Bill would have retired on the day like that, bought a boat and a helicopter or something and just gone fishing, But what it meant was there were all these Irish restaurants and pubs in town, and these guys would come down from up north literally with money falling out of their pockets, and they'd come up and stuff this big bunch of money in you and say, sing us Kevin Barry, and you'd say, oh, we don't really do that, or we've just done it. And he'd go, here's more. And you'd think, fine, not a problem, we'll do it as many times as you like. So, and because I couldn't play the drums and stuff, somebody said, here, have this thing with bottle tops on it. And I thought, you're joking, that's not an instrument, is it? And they said, oh, no, it is. It's an ancient Australian instrument called the lagerphone. And I thought, oh, you're taking the piss out of me. But it was. So I started playing that, and that was good. And then somebody said, here's a tin whistle, have a go at that as well. So I did. And here we are all those years on. So it's worked out well, really. And it's a great instrument, the lagerphone, because you just, you nip down to the hardware store and you buy a bit of wood and a few screws and stuff, and then you go to the pub and you drink until you've collected enough bottle tops. Now I reckon that's my idea of an instrument, really. I'm surprised the rest of the world hasn't cottoned onto it, actually.
If you could drink yourself a fiddle, you would, wouldn't you?
Yes. Why would anybody want to do that? Or an accordion? But yeah, so the lagerphone's a good thing to play. And of course, people may take the piss out of you in Australia, but boy, am I worth my weight in gold busking in Europe. Ha, eh? They've seen fiddles and accordions till they're coming out their ears. But I get on the street with the old lagerphone, they all come up and go, oh, what is this? And I say, give us a quid or a kroner and I'll tell you all about it, you know. But can we have our picture taken with the lagerphone? I say, sure, that'll be another 10 francs, thank you very much. But no, I was very popular among the band. They all of a sudden wanted me. Like, oh, will you come out and busk with me today, Dobe? Oh, yeah, maybe. So it's good.
And you play the bodhran as well, yeah?
Yes, yes.
Tell us the story you were telling us last night to do with miking it up in Ireland.
Oh yeah, no, I was saying to Ronan from Keeler, when I first saw them, I thought, it's amazing, you know, everything comes full circle, because there he is with the Bowen amplified, whacking away at it, and everybody's having a wonderful time. And when we first went to Europe in 74, we had this idea about amplifying the Bowen. So we got a Barkasberry pickup and put it on the rim and plugged it into an amp, and I had, you know, chorus pedal and stuff, and you know, flange and stuff. Yeah, exactly. And all these people in Ireland were coming up and going, oh no, oh, you can't do that. And I say, oh, why not? Come on, that's all right. Oh, it's breaking some, you know, great folk lore.
So you found Australians are more prepared to cross over, they're more adventurous in their music?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, this festival's been, well, this one particularly, but Australian festivals have been incredible world music adventures for lots of years now. I mean, people talk about Port Fairy, where we are here, starting off as an Anglo-Celtic. Oh, and there's a bit of Anglo-Celtic music just as we speak, but that was many, many years ago, like for the last dozen years or more. So Australian festivals, I guess because you don't have enough people. That's the bottom line. I mean, you can't really run a very large festival on one or two music genres. You've got to have enough, you've got to be able to appeal to a broad mass to get a decent number of people through the gate. Whereas, you know, some of the festivals we went to England and went to Sidmouth, the Sidmouth Folk Festival, which we were really thrilled to be there, but there was us and like 8,000 Morris dancers, which, you know, somebody said to me, Christ, they all sound like lagerphones. There's just all these people going chink, chink, chink down the street. And I had a wonderful time, because Morris music's really percussive. And little did they know it, but they should have had a lager. It's fantastic to play on the lagerphone. So I had a wonderful time. But that was a whole festival, and it was just about Morris dancing and stuff. And we thought it was the strangest thing. I mean, Morris dancing, well, my humble opinion's a little on the strange side as it is, you know. All those policemen and accountants sort of going into their wardrobes like Superman and coming out with flowers on their hats and everything, and then leaping about and banging sticks together. I think, wow. But yeah, so you couldn't possibly do that in Australia. So all our festivals have always been full of adventurous music, I think.
And Australians in general? More adventurous musically?
Well, but it's also, we're not great, we're also great breakers of tradition. I mean, you know, it's almost, well, it's almost an Australian tradition in itself that you don't let people impose artificial boundaries on you. Now, Australians aren't great respecters of authority for authority's sake. And we don't have, I mean, when we went to this Morris Festival, there was actually a newspaper distributed in the town, and the paper was full of these incredibly vicious and vitriolic articles where the traditional Morris dancers were having a go at the new Morris dancers because they were breaking the tradition. And this was, so see, that was hundreds of years of tradition. But I mean, we haven't got hundreds of years of anything. Well, got a couple hundred years of white occupation, but all the music that's within that, and it's only in the last 30 or 40 years that all those incredible waves of migration after the Second World War and all that music floods into the place. So I mean, there really isn't. You can't, nobody's going back hundreds of years and saying, this is how it was played, because we really don't know. I mean, even the sort of stuff we're playing, the bush music, nobody's really got much of an idea about how that was, 60, 70, 80 years ago, because it wasn't documented. Whereas, if you go to England or an older culture in Europe, for instance, you are going to have these records dating back hundreds of years about what instruments were used and how they were played and all those sorts of things. So you can actually have lots of rules and regulations about how you should interpret the music. But we're such a young country. And I mean, it's the same with, it's the same with the United States. I mean, you look what happened to, Arcadian music goes over from France, and then bits come over from Africa, and other bits come from Anglo-Celtic, and the Germans come over, and they all go to the south of America, and you get all this fucking amazing, amazing music that has no rules and boundaries, and it ends up sweeping the world. It's fantastic.
How do you think the land itself, like Australia itself, has influenced Australian music, your kind of music?
Oh, obviously the most, the easiest way to see that is if you're talking about Indigenous music. I mean, it's obvious how the land affects that, because that's part of a religious belief and a personal connection to it. But I mean, in terms of our Anglo-Celtic tradition, if you look at the songs, they're nearly all about the land in one way or another. They're about conquering land to make farms or to earn a living on it. They're about the weather. They're about the isolation of the land. And they're about all the occupations that basically happen over the mountains on the land. Like, they're all about shearing and droving. I mean, taking mobs of animals thousands of miles through the most inhospitable climates, which has generated that fantastic dry black Australian humour, which is like, hey, when things can't get any worse, you've got to have a laugh about it. If you can't have a laugh about it, you would just look at, the salt plains like stretching out in front of you, and you just go and cut your throat. Or you'd never do it. I mean, you've got to be a little crazy, and that's an element in the music, and that's essential. I mean, and to be a musician, you have to be a little crazy. And you were just
how crazy you are.
Well, and you were just telling me about some of the young Finnish people who are a bit crazy. We're all a bit crazy, and that's a vital element of the music. I mean, that's why people love folk music, because it's stories about them, but it's also that everybody can get involved in it. There aren't barriers with security guards and all those things. Like at a festival like this, all comparatively famous people within this realm are just like wandering through the crowd. You bump into them at the beer tent. There isn't anybody here who's actually protected in any way at all. And I was saying to somebody, I have been here for 20 years now, and I've never seen a fight. In 20 years, I've never seen a fight, and my Jesus, if you go to that Guinness tent late at night, there's been a bit of consumption going on, and there's never been a fight. And I mean, that's the same with those festivals all over the world.
Do you think it's something, what you're saying, like I found that at WOMAD too, the interaction
Just
of
hang on a
musicians?
second till this car.
Ah, yes.
Because there's a bit of noise there.
He's trying very hard to be very helpful though, Ron. Thank you, sir. You're a very nice man.
Just while we're paused for a second, I wouldn't mind getting, because the light's about to go behind that
Shots of us
tent.
together.
The light's about to go behind that tent.
Whoa.
Jesus.
Yes, right.